project. My name is Emma Citrick, and together with my colleagues Nina and Laura, I'm coordinating this project. We work for Flanders Food, so Flanders Food is the coordinator of BeTrust. This is the first masterclass in a series of 8, and 8 masterclasses are designed to explore the vital role of consumer perceptions in shaping the future of biotechnologies, and we adopt a dedicated focus on the agri-food and bio-based sectors. And with this first masterclass, we want to set the scene of the BeTrust project. So we want to explain to you why we see trust building as a precondition for scaling the positive impact of biotechnologies and how we see to do it. So the idea of today. And I see that there are still people coming in, which is great, so we will accept them in the meantime. Let's have a look at the lineup. So we have a couple of very nice speakers for you today. First, we have Professor Jessica Ascherman-Witzel. She's also advisory board member to the BeTrust project, so we're happy that she's here today. She will provide the first contribution. She's professor in marketing and consumer behavior at the Department of Management at Paris University. And she's also director of the research center MAP. And they conduct research on value creation in the food sector for consumers, industry, and society. And she will give a talk on the general importance of fostering consumer acceptance from actually a food system transformation. Then we have Laurien van Dijk of VIB. She's also working with us on the project, and she is portfolio manager of the Grand Challenges program at VIB, Flanders Institute for Biotechnology. The Grand Challenges program is a translational research program that aims to increase the societal impacts of VIB's research. And Laurien will provide insights into how within the context of the program, stakeholders' unmet needs are captured, and often through co-creation methods. Subsequently, we have Anna de Kok, who will take the virtual stage, and she is marketing and communications manager at Paleo. Paleo is a cutting-edge Belgian agri-food biotech startup, and they produce animal proteins through precision fermentation. And Anna will explain how, even as a B2B company, working on consumer acceptance is actually quite critical. And then finally, we conclude this masterclass with a presentation by Veerle Rijkaard and Charlotte Boone, co-founders of Alice Down the Rabbit Hole, also partner in the BeTrust consortium. They are experts in consumer engagement, multi-stakeholder approaches, and also use co-creation and co-design methods for that. And they will share actually insight into the state-of-the-art co-creation program that we are developing within the context of the BeTrust project. So it's actually our key methodology that we adopt in the project that they will explain. Then we will wrap up with a Q&A, and we have 15 minutes for that. So if you would have questions, please keep them for the end. Just before we start, a couple of practicalities. So as you have noticed, this session will be recorded because we will feature the masterclass also on our BeTrust forum that you are probably acquainted with if you have registered for this masterclass. We would like everyone to mute themselves unless you are a speaker, of course, and it's your turn. And as I already said, we will take questions at the end of the masterclass. And that is except for questions for the first speaker, Jessica, because she has to leave the masterclass at 10 sharp. So we will take a couple of questions after her presentation. Then a final note, at the end of the masterclass, we would like to ask you to fill out a very, very short survey just to evaluate the masterclass, and we will give some directions at the end. Good, I will now quickly start with a short introduction to the project itself. So here you have the general info on the project. The full title of the project is Co-Creation Methodology for Biotechnology Trust Building Measures for Improved Innovation Uptake in the Biobased Innovation System, a mouthful. But it already gives an indication of what will be the key deliverable of this project. It is a co-creation methodology, a state-of-the-art co-creation methodology, but also trust-building measures that we will design based on the results of the co-creation trajectories. And the final goal of this project is indeed to improve the innovation uptake of biotechnologies with a positive sustainability impact. On the right, you see the consortium of partners. So we have 3 agri-food and bioresources clusters on board: Flanders Food, Food Mazie from Spain, and Food and Bio Cluster Denmark. Then we have 2 innovative SMEs, Alice Down the Rabbit Hole and Llama. So they bring actually the social sciences and humanities perspective. I quickly already introduced Alice, and they will do so later on. Llama is a SME from Italy, and they work on social innovation, on sustainability projects, but they're also very good at impact evaluation and management, and that's their role in the project. And then finally, we have VIB, Flanders Institute of Biotechnology, the Research Institute in Life Sciences, and we have Flanders Bio, an independent life science cluster organization in Flanders. So that's the consortium behind this project. Then just a couple of words on why BTrust. Why did we write a proposal for this project? So the general premise of the project is that biotechnology is a critical technology across all aspects of agriculture, food production, and biobased innovation systems at large. So biotechnologies will play a significant role in building sustainable and resilient agri-food systems in Europe. That's a given, I would say. However, at least half of the potential impact of biotech hinges on societal attitudes and also on related mechanisms to govern the use of biotechnologies. In other words, for biotech innovations to have a positive impact, they need to reach an acceleration point. And this is the point at which actually adoption accelerates. Reaching this point depends on several variables, and not only regulation, but to a great extent also it depends on public acceptance, on societal attitudes, the acceptance of society, of consumers and users of these technologies. And therefore, BTrust brings together actually the actors making biotech implementation possible, academia, researchers, policymakers, legislators, industry, with the actors who will be affected by the implemented biotechnologies, that is consumer society, farmers, companies, environmental organizations, etc. BTrust functions a little bit as an interface between these actors, and we bring these actors together in an innovative governance model. That is a model structuring actually the relationships and interactions between these stakeholders and actors, and having also processes for exchange and decision making. And this governance model relies on 4 key pillars, and I will quickly detail them now. The first pillar is actually about impact. It is about the fact that as a project we want to emphasize that we are impact driven. So as I said, our end objective is to scale biotechnologies with positive sustainability impacts in the food and bio-based sectors. This first pillar is also about the fact that we have set up an impact evaluation and management framework, which is very important to us because we want to continuously assess the effectiveness of our methodologies and activities so that we can be accountable for it also at the end of the project. The second pillar is all about enabling comprehensive assessments. So we developed risk-benefit assessments that really provide a comprehensive setting for all actors to assess the development and application of biotechnology innovation. So it's not only a setting for researchers and experts, it's for all actors to understand what the development and application of biotech might entail. The third pillar, it's a bit the pinnacle of the project, let's say, and it's about how co-creation with consumers primarily, but also with other affected stakeholders, is conducive to active trust building. And the result of this pillar is the co-creation program and trust-building measures that can be replicated by different actors. Yeah, and I'm almost there. So the fourth pillar is about securing the longer-term impact of the project and results. And there we will build actual communities of practice around the co-creation program, and they can meet on the B-Trust Forum. So that's more in the second half of the project that we will focus on that. Just a final word on the 6 biotech co-creation cases. So the risk-benefit assessments, the co-creation trajectories, and the program will start from a selection of biotech co-creation use cases that have clear application potential for the agri-food and biobased sectors. So they serve as a test bed of the co-creation activities. And this is my final slide, and then I give the word to the speaker. So here you see the 6 co-creation use cases, and in the subsequent masterclasses we will dedicate also time to each of these cases and present you also the results of the co-creation trajectories. I'm going to stop here because I see I'm already running out of time, and I would like to give the word to Jessica, if she's there. Jessica? Yeah, so I will stop sharing and you can share your slides, okay?
Yeah, okay, that's good. First, let me know if you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we hear you very well.
Okay, that's good. Then I should share my screen. Okay, can you see the slide?
Yes, perfect. Yeah.
In the full version?
Full version, yeah, it looks good.
Very good. Okay, thanks a lot. I can hear that in a way I'm going to... yes?
We see the presenter view of your presentation.
Okay.
So,
now it should be full.
Right now it's good.
But
yeah.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so I can hear that I'm going to support a bit what Emma already had been saying about the reason of this project. And because I was talking as first, I wanted to sort of start very broadly. But as a background, I mean, Emma already said a bit what I'm working about. I'm doing consumer behavior research and marketing research. I also teach a lot about sustainability in business and consumer behavior. And in my research in the MAP Center, we work a lot about interdisciplinary collaboration. And here I'm very often underlining when I do talks that I'm talking about how important societal acceptance is in order to create trust. And just exactly what Emma was just saying, in order to really create this upscaling and acceleration, we really need to have the voices of the different stakeholders and consumers in order to accelerate the uptake of new technologies. So what I'm going to say, I think, will very much underpin that. So I wanted to say 2 things. One about sort of social systems change, how important that is, and why that is different from all the environmental system changes that we are talking about quite a lot when we talk about climate change. And the other is about the role of mindset change and consumers, and then the social tipping. So I'm going to point out a few of those theories and concepts that we use quite a lot. And all of that is sort of the broader perspective of why we need consumer trust, stakeholder trust, and the co-creation with a lot of stakeholders in order to get things going and scaled up. So to the first point about the systemic sustainability transitions, and we really know when we look into the future and we want to transition towards something that we find positive and favorable for sustainability, that a lot of different things can happen, and what is going to happen depends on how we are talking to stakeholders, how we collaborate with stakeholders, and how we talk about things. And especially the trust, because what stakeholders say, for example, to consumers and citizens is really listened to differently depending on how much they trust those people that they hear about the new technologies. So it really depends. What consumers and citizens do depend on what we do today. And I say this because I quite often find that there's an assumption about demand is as it is and we cannot change it. So when we think about systems, we often talk about those environmental tipping points, and we know a lot about how different of those tipping points are cascading and affecting each other. And that's what we talk about quite a lot. And we know that these are sort of the grand challenges in sustainability that we have. But when one then thinks about the societal systems, they often work in a similar way, but the big difference is that here we cannot change the laws because here we can change the laws. So we cannot change the laws when it comes to climate change. Once certain physical interactions happen, we cannot do anything about it, but the social systems we have built. And that is one of the most important things why it is so relevant to look at our social systems and the interactions there and see what we can change there. And that is exactly what then social sciences is about. And I even want to take it a bit further because I talk to a lot of technology-focused people, and often it is assumed that if we just sort of invent a technology, it's going to be taken up by society, and then things are going to be solved. But often, right now, the problem is much more the societal uptake and not the invention of new technologies. And there had been a paper which I would like to give an example, already 2004, where a science paper was finding with the technologies that we already have, if we would just scale these up, then we would already be able to solve climate change. And that was in 2004. So in a way, they were saying we already have the technologies. What we need is the societal upscaling and actually getting these out there and used in a large scale. And that I find super interesting, and that really underlines how important all these societal transitions are, because that's where the real impact in a short time frame can happen. So when I talk about sustainability transitions, there's a whole research area working with sustainability transitions, where researchers are saying, okay, we have to transition how things work in society, and often the focus is on the interaction of the different stakeholders. So how the different stakeholders in law and business and policy are collaborating with each other, and all those interaction and practices that are there. And these interaction and practices are then, so how that system works is called the socio-technical system. So that socio-technical system consists of all those technologies and markets and all those practices and meanings that people put to how things work, the infrastructure that is already built and the policies that are in place. And these are all those multiple actors that Emma was just showing on the slide. Those multiple actors are making up the system. And we know from theory that often a system is rather stable. It doesn't change unless there's sort of a push to change it. And that is what this is about. If systems are supposed to get more sustainable, we need to do something about it and invest into the change. And one of the investment into change is, of course, then in consumer behavior and citizens. And in order to put a picture on that, even though the picture might look a bit messy, there's a lot to see here, but that's one of those pictures that is used in the series, where in the middle is sort of this regime, and it's quite fixed. So there's certain practices, how things are done, and it's rather fixed because it's put into law, it's put into professional norms, it's into how the infrastructure of a supply chain is working. It's kind of rather stable. But then there are these technological new niches and innovations coming up, and if they become stronger and stronger, they're questioning the system. And then institutions tend to sort of stay stable, but if there's a lot of pressure from those new technologies, as well as of people sort of bringing them into the system, then this leads to those interactions, and at some point this leads to a change in a new regime. And this is what is happening in this acceleration point that Emma was showing. And then maybe new practices are established, the infrastructure of the market is changed, and people start thinking differently about how to use a technology, and there's also new infrastructure put in place. And that can be laws, it can be collaborations between companies, and then things change and have a new status. So that is sort of the one part, but in there's a lot of mindset and change happening. And I wanted to underline how important this mindset change is. And that is, in system science, we often talk about that one can change on different levels. So I think a lot of you maybe have looked into system science, and often this iceberg model is shown. And that shows that there might be things that one can change on the surface, but this is often just changing smaller things, but not really going deep into changing the systems. And sustainability transitions need that how the system is working is changing more profoundly and more radically. And you can see that sort of the lower part is the mental models. And that includes what people think, the norms that people have. And that, for example, could be, if we now talk about biotechnology, sort of the mental model of new technologies are always something to be scared about. We know that consumers are really often have a focus on nettleness, and a lot of new technologies they see very skeptical, and this is really difficult to change. But if we can change something about this, this of course has a big impact. And that is what is meant with, if something more profoundly is changed, this can have a big impact. And that can be these mental models. So that's why mindset change is so important. But then I also wanted to talk about the social tipping point. And I think Emma in her slide was also showing a tipping point, which is often happening when the acceleration is happening in the S-curve. That's often where it is pointed at. So the social tipping points are sort of the place in the system where, when this point is reached of change, then the shift towards a new and more preferable state is accelerating. And that is where it can be positive. When we talk about tipping points in the climate change, it's something negative. When we talk about it in social or societal it is something positive, or mostly used as something positive. So this is about socio-technical systems, and then it's positive instead of negative. And this picture here with the tipping point kind of shows that the idea is, before that it's rather difficult to change something, and after that it's getting easier and easier. So when we talk about and that's when mindset change is spreading, that can be one of those tipping points. And that, for example, can be social norms around how we see certain technologies, for example. And there's a really nice, there's a lot of new research about social norms. And that is often also about sort of networks between people and how new ideas are spreading between people. And the interesting thing about especially topics that are rather moralized, like, for example, eating plant-based, it has a lot of moralization around it, or topics that are where people disagree, and it's kind of disagreeing, like, for example, in technologies, then it's difficult to talk to others about this, because once you say one thing or you do one thing, you're kind of questioning what the other is doing. And because we're social beings, we don't like that so much. So there was one really nice paper that explains this, and how then social change and moralized behaviors has to go a different pathway. And one of the points that I took, especially from this paper, is also that it's really important for those stakeholders who want to work with this, is to show how many people already are doing a certain behavior or thinking differently, and kind of making this more public, so that it's easier to see what others are thinking, and that you don't make assumption about what others are thinking, where you maybe underestimate how many people already do this, or how many people already support a new technology. So that is one thing about the social tipping point. And now, before I finalize, I wanted to make two important points that I often see when it comes to citizen consumer behavior, where it is talked about in a certain way about citizen consumer behavior, or certain ground truths are sometimes forgotten in some of the work. The first thing is that, and I show this with this picture, is that often it's talked about the consumer, but of course there is no such thing as the consumer, because consumers are all different from each other. They are in different groups, they have different practices and ideas, so there are always different segments. That's why marketing does those segmentation studies. And it's super important to always be aware of which kind of consumer group you're talking about, which group is the one that you want to change, which one is a group that you don't think is going to change. So you have to really focus on the right group. And that's sometimes forgotten when there's a lot of talk about the consumer, because the consumer, there is no average consumer. People all differ from each other. That also means that in order to change something, like, for example, societal acceptance and trust to new technologies, one really has to think about which kind of activities can help, can foster this in which group. So that is one thing. And the other thing, I use this picture here where which has underlying this the theory of the COM-B model. So talking about that consumer change comes about if different factors are triggered, and that can be capability, motivation, and opportunity, and then behavior change comes about. And this is sort of reflecting what nearly all consumer behavior change models are saying, is it's always a question of that it's not only one thing. It's information alone is not enough. Opportunity alone is not enough if you're not motivated. And also, even if people have the opportunity and the motivation, maybe they don't have the capability. So it's always, or very, very likely, it's a combination of these, while at the same time also it depends on which type of consumer group you talk about, because it might depend on the context which that this person is in. So to sum up, social acceptance work is super important in engaging stakeholders, and I've tried to sort of give some of those theories and concepts that I find especially important here in fostering that. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, super. Thank you very much, Jessica. It was a super interesting presentation, and I think it perfectly sets the frame of this project, and it also give insights into the fact that it's not easy also to work on these more societal uptake issues, but it's very important. So thank you very much. I think you still have a couple of minutes for some questions. Are there some people in the audience that want to ask something to Jessica? Any questions? Yeah, Laurie?
Hi, Jessica. Thanks a lot for the presentation. Indeed, I think it nicely sets the stage, and I probably will refer to it also later on. I had a question on this iceberg model that you showed, like where you have always a top layer that probably comes first. But I wonder, in general, what you think is needed to go to the deeper layers. Is it like more time for the stakeholders to consume the information? Is it more effort from the people who give the information, or how do you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely you're right that it takes time. Mindset change takes more time. And I often think about uses when, for example, people say, okay, let's do nudging, because I think nudging is maybe on the surface. It's an event. You can nudge people to choose a different food in the supermarket, but it's not going to change it in the long term. So I think then maybe changing the event is there. Short-term measures can be used, but if it's about the mindset change, and as you say, that takes time. So this is also about education, motivation, changing the narrative, changing the words. So it takes definitely time, because typically opinion change needs time, because it needs reflection, but it then has a bigger impact in the long run. So that's why I think, for me, that really shows that nudging is on the surface, but mindset change, that actually then needs education and time. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Doesn't seem so. Okay, but thanks a lot, Jessica. Then we leave you and you can move on to the teaching. I assume you had a teaching class. Yeah, thanks a lot for being here and for the nice talk. And then we continue with the rest of the presentations. Laureen, I think it's your turn then. You're already visible, so please feel free to share your slides.
Yes, I'm doing that right now. Can you see them in presenter mode and hear me clearly?
It's in presenter mode and we hear you. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So Emma, you already sort of introduced me. So I indeed just want to say I'm sort of a project manager in the VIB Grand Challenges program, to put it shortly. And today I will give a short testimonial of how we incorporate interactions with stakeholders in our program. But before I zoom in a bit on VIB, the Grand Challenges program, and the examples, here I have a slide that we also show to our researchers, or try to show to them to explain why we think it's important to interact with the stakeholders. I think it's also important to start the presentation with that. Generally speaking, we think it fosters inclusive, relevant, and impactful research, and really fastens the implementation, because all of the things you can see on the slide and you can read for yourself. So that's why always in our projects, we try to organize a certain interaction moment with the stakeholders. So let's keep that in mind for the rest of the presentation. Then I will start with a short introduction of the institute I'm coming from, the Flemish Institute for Biotechnology, which I will call VIB, for now. VIB is one of the strategic research centers in Flanders. Flanders is a part of Belgium, for those who do not know that. We try to excel in basic research in life sciences. And then second and third, we try to translate the findings of the research to society. And this can either be following the tech transfer route, so the economic valorization, or going towards societal impact. And that is where our Grand Challenges program also comes into play. All the research labs of VIB are incorporated in one of the Flemish universities. So all the principal investigators in VIB are also professors at a certain university. And as such, we try to have a constant collaboration with the universities and stay close to them. We're quite young institute. We were founded a bit more than 25 years ago, but we already have around 2,000 researchers and staff with a lot of nationalities, and they're organized in research groups. Each of these research groups is located in a specific research center that focuses on one of the domains of life sciences. And you can see our 10 research centers here on the slide. They vary from everything in biomedical sciences to plant sciences, microbiology, and the most recent one is AI and computational biology. So as you can see, we work in almost all domains of life sciences. Then I will zoom in a bit on the VIB Grand Challenges program, the program I'm coming from. We're a societal impact program in VIB. So we focus on projects that are centered around an unmet need in society. This unmet need in society can be in the context of climate action, healthy living, or everything in between. Actually also spanning all domains that VIB is active on. And as such, we also try to be aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals that you can see on the slide. A bit more specifically, you can see our program, the VIB Grand Challenges program, as an internal funding body in VIB. So we get a bit of extra money from the government, and we provide financial but also structural support for specific projects. And these projects are what we call reverse translational research projects. So they're really centered around an unmet need in society, a grand challenge, a problem they identify. This is the point where they start from, an identified problem, and they work backwards to find a solution for this problem by working on a specific research topic that falls in their area. We hope to work at a global scale, but usually we, of course, start at Flemish, Belgian, or international scale, and we try to open up as much as we can. What is important in the context of today is that we stimulate our researchers to work in an interdisciplinary way. This means that we encourage them to build a consortium with external experts who have complementary expertise. So usually this is clinicians, agricultural experts, depending on the context of the project. And while VIB researchers take the lead, at least 50% of the budget of our projects needs to go to these other groups, really to stimulate them to build that consortium. But of course, we hope that they go one step further and work in what we call a transdisciplinary way, also incorporating stakeholders or societal actors really into the project. This can, for example, be patient organizations, farmer organizations, policy influencers, all of the societal actors that you can think about. We're stimulating this by actively taking up the stakeholder interaction activities for the projects. So while, of course, the scientists are in the lead of the scientific part, we take care of the stakeholder interactions, we take care of the project selection, the project management, the monitoring, and the reporting to the government. So this is in a nutshell a bit how we are organized as a funding program. These unmet needs I've been talking about, they can be in different areas, the areas that you can see here on the slide. But today, of course, most important are climate action and sustainable feed and food, and the project that focus on this unmet needs. Here you see an overview of all the projects we currently have in our portfolio. So in the past 6 years, we have launched 5 calls for proposals where projects get submitted. They go to an external review procedure, and some of them get selected. And here you see the 14 projects that got selected in the past. It's quite a lot of them, so I'm definitely not going to explain all of them, but there are a lot of biomedical projects. Some of them have ended, some of them recently started. But today I will focus a bit on the Soy in Flanders project of the 3rd call and the BioPet project of the 4th call, because they fit well in the context of this project. So I'll start with Soy in Flanders. The Soy in Flanders project tried to tackle the unmet need of more sustainable agriculture and more alternative crops in the context of the protein shift from animal-based proteins to more plant-based proteins. They tried to tackle this unmet need by introducing soy as a sustainable crop, but also a protein-rich crop in Flanders for human consumption. Interesting for this project is that they worked with 1,000 citizens and 70 farmers who literally planted soy in their own garden. And then afterwards, the researchers collected this soy, parts of the soil and the bacteria in the soil and analyzed these. So after this analysis, we identified some beneficial bacteria in the soil that could help soy grow with an acceptable yield for the farmers. And we also developed a product. But besides that scientific part, in this project, there were also guidelines developed to optimally cultivate soy. And of course, the idea was to create awareness about the importance of legumes like soy for human health, but also for the environment. So in this project, as you can see, citizens and farmers were already actively involved, but they also play an important role at the end of the project to really take up the solution that was put forward. The second project that I will use as an example is the BioPet project. Here, the researchers try to tackle the unmet need of more sustainable food, specifically food for cats and dogs, so pet food. And they try to do this by creating new fats for pet food that were created by yeast instead of based on animals. They started the project by developing a certain yeast that was known to produce a lot of fats, Yarovia lipolytica. They engineered it, and they made it in such a way that the yeast can convert waste streams and side streams into fats for pet food in the first place. Besides this scientific part, also here they performed a techno-economic and life cycle assessment, really to make sure that their product is sustainable from start to end, and that the risks and benefits on economic and technical aspects are really taken into account. And their aim that they really put forward is to set up a strategic stakeholder network to take all stakeholders into account and get the product to the market and to the stakeholders. So these are two projects that I would like to use as an example. They're a bit different, but they fit in the context of this project. And now I will zoom a bit out to explain how we approached the stakeholder interactions for this project. But before I go there, I would like to put the stakeholder definition that we use forward to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. So for us, a stakeholder is an individual or a group of individuals that either has an influence on the project, is influenced by the project, or interested in the project. Can be positive, negative, closely related to the project, further away, in all possible scenarios. It's not the same as the end user. While the end user is indeed the stakeholder at the end of the whole chain, there are more stakeholders in the end user. For example, interim users or people just related to the project who maybe not actively use the solution of the project. So now we've made the definition clear. I will explain how we see the different levels of stakeholder interaction in our program. So the first level we see as informing. Informing is unidirectional sharing of information, for example, by a website where you put information on a certain project on. The second level is involving stakeholders. This is a two-way interaction where you really get feedback from the stakeholders, you talk with them, and you incorporate the feedback into your project. For example, roundtable discussions or maybe surveys. The third level for us is collaborating with the stakeholder. This is really a circular interaction where the stakeholder is part of your project and really contribute to the results. For example, a citizen science project. And I will go deeper into these levels with the example of the projects also later on. But before I do that, I also would like to highlight that we take sort of 4 rules of thumb into account when we organize stakeholder activities. First of all, we always map the stakeholders at the start of the project. And we think it is really important to then already identify who we need to take into account for informing, for involving, and for collaborating. So from the start of the project, we know who we want to target for the different activities. Of course, this can change during the project. It's never set in stone and always a bit flexible, but this is our starting point. Secondly, we always make the activities we do with the stakeholders depending on the project needs. Though we like to interact with stakeholders, we don't just do it for fun. It needs to be a meaningful interaction. So for example, if we want to decide on the course of a project, we do an activity at the start of the project. If you want to have feedback on a certain result, we of course have to wait until this result is generated. And we do an activity, for example, in the half of the project. If we want to decide on what the next steps are, we do an interaction activity at the end of the project. So all results are there and the stakeholders can think along on the next steps to get the product or the solution to the stakeholder. This is the timing that is really important. Third rule is, of course, the scientists are always in the lead of our project, so we need to collaborate with them. This is really to stimulate them to go a bit deeper than the first layer of the iceberg, as Jessica explained, and to really change the thinking patterns of scientists who might think they have the solution while it's not accepted by the stakeholders. So this is really needed to make a meaningful interaction. And then the last one is that we try to involve stakeholder organizations, like patient organizations or farmer organizations, to have, first of all, for us to have access to the farmers or the patients, but also because they're a group and usually it makes them a bit more vocal. So we try to take these 4 rules into account when we organize the activities. I've explained you which type of involvement, informing, and collaboration we see. So now I go to the examples. On the level of informing, we usually target the broad public. So this is a bit the same for both the soy and the biopet project. Here are some examples on the slide, but of course there are plenty more. For example, we always make a website with an information movie, so an animation movie explaining the project that is easily accessible for people that don't have a scientific background. Then we have these cardboard info totems, as we call them, that you see on the picture, and we go with them to broad public events like the Day of Science, the Dag van de Wetenschap, and so forth, really to inform the people. And then the third one that you see is arts and science collaborations. It's a bit out of the box, but it really helps us to reach an audience that otherwise we wouldn't reach with our more standard informing activities. So these are just 3 examples, but I think you get the message of informing and the examples that are here. Then for involvement, for biopet, we mainly targeted pet owners and pet food companies. So the first example you see there is a co-creation session with pet owners and interviews with veterinarians. This was organized by Alice on the Rabbit Hole, who you will hear later in this webinar, who's also a partner in the project, and who was a subcontractor in the biopet project. So they really took care of this part of the involvement activities. And the co-creation session with the pet owners really was about getting to know what guided their decisions on buying a certain pet food. Is it mainly, do they look at sustainability? Do they look at price mainly? What is important for them in buying a specific type of pet food? From this co-creation session, we learned that actually sustainability is not the first thing they think about, which maybe we could have predicted, but mainly the well-being of their pets. So whether the food is tasty, whether the food is healthy, this was really important. And also that they relied quite heavily on the veterinarians for advice on certain types of pet food. So therefore, Alice also performed in-depth interviews with the veterinarians to get to know how they decided to advise a certain type of pet food and what they thought was important. So here we really targeted sort of indeed the end users. Well, the end user here are cats and dogs, but that was impossible. So we targeted the pet owners. Secondly, Ilvo organized a workshop for pet food companies, really to get their feedback on what their needs are in terms of the fats that they use in their pet food formulation, which types of pet food they mainly sold. So really sort of the industry angle we got there. And then thirdly, there were also online questionnaires with pet food companies that were harder to reach. While we always favor live interactions, sometimes we go to online questionnaires if you want to go more in depth or if you want to reach difficult to reach audiences. Here it was specifically on the types of fats also these companies used in their formulation. So we got a lot of information out of these 3 involvement activities that really helped the scientists to decide on the specific goals of their projects and which course the project should take. So here we always did this at the start of the project, and it was very helpful. You will see a testimony of one of the scientists also later on. For involvement for the soy project, we mainly target farmers and citizens. So we did 2 reverse science cafes, one with citizens, one with farmers. I will explain a bit what we call a reverse science cafe. So I guess you know the concept of around the table discussion, where scientists or other experts sit at the table with the target audience, in this case, either citizens or farmers, small tables with like 6 people, and there is a discussion. Usually the farmers or citizens would ask questions to the scientists and the scientists would answer. But here we try to turn it around, and the scientists ask questions to the farmers or the citizens, and the farmers or the citizens answer to these questions. This can indeed, as previously, be questions like to the farmers: if you want to plant soy, what is important for you? Is it mainly the yield? Is it the ease of use? Is it the price? What do you need to introduce a new crop in your field? What do you need from us as scientists before you would start introducing this as a crop? To citizens, the questions were more related to their consumption behavior and whether sustainability played a role there. So here we also tried to set a bit the stage on how we would get soy to the farmers, but also to the citizens. And next to that, also here we did online questionnaires, because in these reverse science cafes, we reached almost 20 people, but with the online questionnaires, we reached almost 1,000 people. So this was also to increase the scale. Here we did the activities almost at the end of the project, because the scientists and the project leaders wanted to decide what the next steps would be. Would they already go to the farmers, or was extra research needed? And based on the feedback, they decided that they wanted to do an extra research project, which also started in the Grand Challenges program very recently. So then we go to the 3rd level of collaboration. Here I only have an example of soy, because we're also still learning, and collaborating with stakeholders is not always easy. We try to change the mindset of the scientists, but it doesn't always work for us. So this is the only example for now I can give you. The Soy in Flanders project was a citizen science project. So the citizens and the farmers who planted the soy in their gardens were really actively collaborating in the project. They were not just planting the soy, they were also measuring it. They provided a lot of surveys, they participated in discussion groups, so they were really part of the project. This was for us a really great example, the first citizen science project we had. And I chose this picture, though it's not that pretty maybe, but because at that time, the Minister of Agriculture, Minister Krivit, was there to plant the first soy seed in the first garden. So it was a good moment for us as a program. Okay, here I've given 3 examples, well, 4 examples of 2 projects of how we have approached stakeholder interaction in the different projects. But I would also like to give the word to the scientists. So I asked for a little quote of the both of them. So one of the biopet project and one of the soy project. And as you can read for yourself, and as we always see also when we do these activities, it's opening their mind really much. Sometimes scientists are working on a certain crop for years, but they have never spoken to a farmer. So it's really interesting for them to hear the other side and the insights that the farmers or the citizens can have. So it's something that always sharpens the scientific focus, as Jan says, and reshapes the scientific questions, as Sophie confesses. So for us, it's always a nice activity, and also for the scientists, it really contributes to their project. So this was my last slide. I would like to thank you for your attention, and the Grand Challenges Dream Team, because it's not only me, we're a team of 4 people, and of course, everybody that's contributed to our activity. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Larine, for this nice talk. And I think it's really nice to see that also a large research institute in life sciences, such as VEB, is kind of experimenting with these methods. It would be optimal, of course, if these methods would just be mainstreamed in all scientific practices and funding schemes, but therefore we have BTrust, right? So no, thanks a lot. Questions for Larine, we keep them for the end. So I would like to give the word now to Anna of Paleo.
Thank you. Let me just quickly share my screen.
Yes.
And let me know if you see it. Okay.
Yes, almost.
Okay. All right. So hello, everyone. Good morning. And Emma, thank you for a warm welcome. I'm Anna de Kock, Marketing Communications Manager at Paleo. And at Paleo, we are working on something exciting in alternative protein space. And today I would like to walk you through how we can build trust in this space, and also why we think consumer acceptance is really critical, even for a B2B company like ours. But before we dive into this, I would like to, just as a reminder, tell you why we are in alternative protein space. So we all know we are facing a really pressing global challenge with growing global population by 2050 that is expected to increase by 30%. And at the same time, the demand for meat consumption will also drastically increase. We also know that animal agriculture massively contributes to environmental devastation, as it accounts for more greenhouse gas emissions than the whole transport sector. And lastly, we also see a lot of inefficiencies in animal-based proteins, like, for example, the fact that it takes 9 calories to feed chicken to produce 1 calorie for human consumption. So these are all examples to highlight that it's clear that we need to change how we feed the world. And as you can see, by just changing 1 kilogram of plant-based protein from animal-based protein to plant-based protein, we can save as much CO2 as a 3-hour flight. We can save water used by an average European each year. We can save so much land as 3 tennis courts of land and the life of 3 animals. So we know the future of sustainable proteins is here, but the question is, are consumers ready? When we look into all the consumer research and studies, we see that there are a lot of barriers that block consumers to eat more plant-based foods. And these 4 barriers that you see here on the slide are the ones that come up almost in every study. So they are price, taste, a need for more information, and safety concerns. And today I would like to especially focus on the last 2 because they are the ones that are most correlated to trust, so to say. So according to recent studies by McKinsey and Smart Proteins, we see that 1/4 of consumers they don't understand the plant-based alternatives products. They don't understand how they are made of, what is in there exactly, and they don't understand also the benefits. We also see that claims or terms like bioengineered, fermented, or made with biotechnology simply causes uncertainty for them, and basically they just don't trust it. Similarly, 1 in 4 consumers have raised some kind of concerns about healthy and safety. So people often fear that the products might contain some artificial ingredients, they lack certain nutrients, or that they might have some long-term unknown effects. And many consumers seek for some kind of reassurance that these products are free of GMO and that they meet the same standards as conventional foods. So building trust in this space means addressing all these concerns with transparency of about ingredients, about nutritional profiles, and rigorous quality controls. And of course, taste is mentioned also here is one big piece of the puzzle in consumers' barriers we see. And this is maybe a good time to tell you a few words about our company, Paleo. So here you can see Hermes and Andy, our co-founders. They are passionate vegetarians and longtime supporters of animal welfare. And they once said that if sustainable plant-based proteins would have the same taste as animal meat, it would be a different story. And at Paleo, we now offer that different story. So looking back back to history, where going back to the roots where it all started. Well, first we hunted for animal meat, then we bred, then we realized the toll it takes on the planet, and now at Paleo we are trying to rewrite the story of meat, and now we brew. So how do we make it happen? We use precision fermentation to make animal-based proteins using yeast. So we basically instruct yeast to produce animal protein by inserting a synthetical DNA code into the yeast cell. And it produces myoglobin, our final product. When added to meat alternatives, it gives the red color of meat, and it also contributes to browning upon cooking. Most importantly, it gives the same taste because it's bioidentical to meat. Also, it offers the same type and level of bioavailable iron as in conventional meat, and it's free of GMO, thanks to our unique process where the yeast secretes the protein, so there is no pieces of DNA inside. And where are we now as a company? We are based in Belgium. We are a growing company of around 30 employees now, with 10 different nationalities. We would like to enter market as soon as possible. So we are actively working on all regulatory approval applications, just to be sure to enter the market in various regions around the globe. And even though we are a B2B company, we understand that consumer perception and consumer concerns and perspectives are really critical. Because in the end, our customers will be other businesses, but it's the consumer acceptance that will drive success in overall alternative protein sector as a whole. So we, as a company, we committed ourselves to go beyond that traditional B2B mindset and to focus on what matters to consumers in the end. And we do this by 4 pillars. So this is how we tackle that trust challenge in the industry. So we focus on 4 key pillars. First, engagement and direct engagement with consumers. We believe that directly engaging with consumers will give us some valuable insights. For example, in 2 weeks, we are hosting a full day co-creation. It's a word that is used today many times. Co-creation squad with consumers. And we will check on their barriers, motivations, expectations, and it will allow us to get really deeper insights than we would have just from the published studies. So we chose this co-creation methodology because we believe when having on-ground feedback, we can also adapt certain statements and test different hypotheses and basically understand the end consumers much better depth. Second pillar is consumer research and education. As a company, we are committed to stay fully up to date with the most recent studies and research done, and also to implement the education part into our marketing. So with the results, for example, from such co-creation study we would like to take it back to our customers, to our businesses that we will be working with, and to empower them so that they, in turn, will educate their end consumers about the safety and value of our products. So here, I think education is key in the whole trust challenge we are facing, because we know that when people understand, they trust. Third pillar, certifications. Here we are working hard to get all different certifications like vegan, halal, kosher, and free of GMO. And for us, it's not just, these certifications are not just labels. They are assurance of quality and ethics. So they should be like they should give a trust signal to consumers that we are committed to always achieving highest standards. And lastly, collaboration with industry partners. We believe that only by collaborating with industry partners, we can, and when sharing insights, we can learn from each other. And this will give us a lot of power into regaining trust in the industry. Even the webinar like today is one example of our effort to show how we foster our openness, transparency, and shared knowledge. Yeah, so with this, I would like to conclude that at Paleo, we don't only produce alternative proteins, but we want to create a future where the food is sustainable and also trusted by all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anna, for this great presentation. It's really nice to see that Paleo is taking this trust element so serious, and that you're really, indeed, as you said, going beyond the traditional B2B mindset. So it's quite nice to see. So thanks for the talk. Again, questions for Anna, we keep them for the end. So then now we give the floor to Veerle and Charlotte of Alice, partner in the project, and they will detail the co-creation methodology developed within the context of the project. So the floor is yours, Veerle and Charlotte. If you manage to unmute.
I was going to the mic. So hi everyone, good morning. I'm Charlotte, and my colleague Veerle will take over halfway. And together we are Alice, as Emma introduced us in the beginning also, and we specialize in consumer involvement, stakeholder involvement, and co-creation. So the presentation of Jessica, she focused on the importance of trust and consumer acceptance related to these technologies for the agri-food and the biobased sectors. And Doreen and Anna gave some nice examples of how they approach the stakeholder interaction and the consumer co-creation. In this presentation, we will focus on a methodology, a general methodology to explore the trust barriers in order to get solutions to overcome them. So a quick reminder of what we do in the BTrust project, as Emma also introduced at the beginning. So we focus on the role of trust and acceptance among the public and stakeholders as one of the major hurdles in implementation of new biotechnologies. So the idea is to provide a governance model that encourages collaboration with important stakeholders, including the consumer. And for this, we developed this methodology for finding these trust barriers, and for which we also will provide a framework with measures and principles on how to deal with them. So why do people not trust whatever we throw at them, especially when it comes to their food?
Sorry, Charlotte. Oh. I think the slides aren't moving.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
I did move them, so I see my own slide.
Don't see. I'm still on the first slide, digging for trust.
Yes,
Okay.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So if you stop and share again, maybe then, I don't know.
Yeah. I will check why it is not working. Oh, okay. So this is it.
We are on slide 2 now. Yeah, that's it.
So now I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so why do people not trust whatever technologies we throw at them? A very important factor at play here is the fear of the unknown. So neophobia, it is the fear of anything new or unfamiliar. And it's quite common in the context of food. So most people are not that adventurous when it comes to trying new foods. They only trust the things they know. Also, there's technophobia, which is also quite common, especially among older people, because they did not grow up with these technologies. And they don't trust these technologies often because of different reasons. because they don't see the need of it. So they didn't grow up with them, and they have something like, I did my whole life without it, so why would I need it now? And also because they do not know, or they cannot see the consequences of what this technology will do. So biotechnologies for food, they combine a bit of both, and not knowing the benefits, not seeing the need, and not knowing unintended negative consequences are key aspects in the lack of trust towards these biotechnologies. Which is why we base our methodology on these aspects. So when we want to pinpoint these trust barriers, we have to ask ourselves, like, who is most affected by this technology? Also, are they affected negatively? So are there certain risks to them from this technology? And how large are these risks? Also, do they have anything to gain? And what do they have to gain? To what degree? How large is this impact on them? And also, very important, how large and influential is this group that is affected by this technology? So in what ways could they hold back the successful implementation of the technology? And how could they boost the successful implementation of this technology? So basically what we suggest is to talk to them, talk to those stakeholders, talk to those people who do not trust your technologies. You don't want to do this just randomly, talk to anyone, but you want to do this in a kind of structured, targeted, and relevant way. So we suggest even better to co-create with them, because this also allows you to get beyond obvious answers. So what is especially different about this co-creation methodology is that we just not rely on thinking for them, what is usually done by scientists. We think for consumers, we think for other people, and we provide them the risks. But here we work with the people involved and potentially affected by this technology. We find out their worries, we find out how they can be avoided through perhaps regulations, more research, or measures for implementation. So what are these co-creation brainstorms exactly? What you need to know about them and be aware of is that it's qualitative research. So you only have about 15 people in a group, so you cannot do statistics on it. Your group is too small. You don't have enough data, but you will get a better view on different opinions of people. So that's the idea, is to gather opinions, all kinds of different opinions from different people. So people think in different ways, and these co-creation brainstorms gives you a way to see how they think. So it's more exploratory research on the why. Also, it's different from a standard focus group, because if you ask questions, it's only open-ended questions, and you usually ask them in a very indirect manner. So it requires them to actively participate and think together, think further, think in their true context, so how they would really do it in real life. So this all brings us to the general co-creation trajectory method. So this is a general overview, and it consists of 5 steps. So this is the first step. And then there are 4. So these are the 5 major steps. And how these co-creation sessions are set up specifically, that is dependent on the stakeholders that are involved, how these stakeholders are involved, also the TRL level of the technology, so how far along the implementation of the technology is, also how well known the case is among consumers, among the broad public, and how well accepted that the technology is already among. And there are other parameters. So because there are so many parameters that define a co-creation trajectory, we chose 6 cases in this project, as Emma already shown at the beginning. And we used them basically as a test case, as 6 test cases to test out our methodology. So each of these cases was clearly had application potential in the real world, but they were specifically chosen to include like a wide range of these critical parameters and aspects. So the setup is always slightly different, and rather than having all similar cases where you also have the same setup each time. So we'll go into this process in a bit more depth, so step by step. And the first step in this process is to identify the stakeholders that are most crucial to involve in your trajectories. So the stakeholders where lack of trust might interfere with the implementation and uptake of the technology case. So this all starts with knowing what the potential risks and benefits are for different stakeholders groups. So our first step starts with a risk-benefit assessment. So our colleagues, they dug through scientific literature to compile like a whole list of potential risks of the technology and how they could be mitigated, and also the benefits of the technology. So it's not the risks for the technology. So it's actually the risks, the impact of the technology on people. Stakeholders who are either impacted or affected by the technology, or that can play a significant role in acceptance and uptake of it. So then we evaluated their importance one by one. And let me get into a bit more detail about this first step. So this first step is the most elaborate one. And the starting point was the stakeholder mapping here. So the starting point for this mapping exercise was the squintable helix that was already shown before. And we made sure so it's important to do this exercise with representatives from different stakeholders from this squintable helix. So we use this squintable helix as a foundation to like more specify our stakeholders. So within society, within legislators and governments, like the environmental representatives, also industry and agriculture, and also like the academic world. So we did this with different partners from the consortium because we represented different parts of this squintable helix, and it's important to get these different stakeholders together in a brainstorm to avoid getting too much of a one-sided view on who you need to involve. So now that we mapped all the stakeholders, we want to know which ones we need to talk to. So which ones are the most important? And the assessment of their importance started with the assessment of their influence on the uptake and the implementation of the technology. So how do they influence each other is part of the things you need to think about when you want to assess who is more important, and then also how large is their potential impact on the technology. So to do this, you also have to take into consideration the things like how they could hold back your technology or give it a boost. So it also matters. It also matters how interested your stakeholders are, because the more interested they are, the larger their impact could be. And that's often related to what's at stake for them. So is there health at stake? Is there jobs at stake? So when these things are at stake, they're much more interested in. And so based on all these aspects, we gave each stakeholder a score for influence, so the importance of them on the uptake and the implementation of the technology, ranging from 1 to 5. Yeah. So the next step is then to assess how much they are affected by the technology, and now my colleague Vele will take over.
Yes, hello. So in the next step, indeed, we assessed starting from the evidence-based RBAs, which we discussed about earlier. So that in these RBAs, the potential risks and benefits on different levels, socioeconomic, environmental, and technoscientific, are assessed and are listed. And then we went through the whole list of stakeholders that we determined per case, and then said like, okay, and plotted basically the risks over the different stakeholders, the risks and the benefits over the different stakeholders. Then again, we assessed per stakeholder the overall risk and the overall benefits. And then again, we did it again with on a scale from 1 to 5, with 1 being low risk or low benefits, and then 5 being high risks or high benefits. So in that way, we had basically like 3 figures, 3 data points per stakeholder group per case, which we plotted in these nice bubble plots to give it a bit of a visual aspect, because otherwise you're just looking at numbers. So you see on the x-axis the overall benefit, on the y-axis the overall risks per stakeholder, and then the size of the bubble basically shows how much influence they have. So these plots we could basically use to prioritize the different stakeholders. Yeah, because we had to prioritize it in the way we will interact with them and who we interact with first, because the ones who are highly impacted, who are highly affected by the risks, for example, and who have a lot of influence, we really want to know what trust issues they are worrying about. The trust barriers, we really have to know them. So the stakeholders that are highly affected by the implementation of the technology, by the risks, and also have quite some influence are basically the ones we want to interact with first. Also, when you look at the stakeholders that are highly impacted by the risks, but have not a lot of benefits to counterbalance with, and also have a lot of influence, are also really important stakeholders to interact with and assess the trust barriers and how they look at technology. On the other hand, you also have stakeholders which often were, like, for example, biotech industry or the researchers, who have a lot of influence and who have a lot of benefits also from the implementation of the technology, but the risks are really limited. And we decided, okay, they are mainly impacted by the trust issues from the other stakeholders, so they will be involved in the co-design of principles and measures to increase the trust with the other stakeholders. So this whole assessment, which was quite elaborate for all the different cases, we used to really prioritize which stakeholders and how we had to interact with them. So how can we, and of course, in the next step, we decided on how to involve these crucial stakeholders, and also decide on the methodology. Like already mentioned, we based ourselves on a design thinking methodology in the framework of B-Trust. Why did we do that? Because design thinking is a methodology that is user-centered, very inclusive, also iterative, because you will see when I elaborate more on the trajectories that we sometimes take a step back. And it's also a very transparent and conceptual way of interacting. The way we interacted can differ. It can be co-creation sessions, which we did quite a few of. Also in-depth interviews were done, and also quantitative surveys. We based the methodology and the way we set it up on gaps and lessons learned from previous projects and previous approaches. Yeah, why do we use different ways of interacting with the different stakeholders? Is because each type of interaction has its pros and cons and attention points. So co-creation sessions, we did co-creation sessions with the consumers because it's a way, and also with farmers, for example, because it's a way to go beyond the preferred answers. Sometimes when doing, like, for example, focus groups or interviews, they can prepare and they will give preferred answers. They won't, for example, really say like, okay, their true feelings about it, and they will be limited in their answers. So if when a constructive dialogue is possible, it's really ideal for challenging disruptive ideas and technologies. But yeah, you really have to involve also the relevant profiles. You just can't involve anybody, so that's really an important attention point. We use the in-depth interviews, or we will use the in-depth interviews for stakeholders that have, like, for example, official opinions and who represent, for example, a bit specific target group or a specific concept. And for them, we used in-depth interviews because often they can't deviate from these official opinions. So that's why we did in-depth interviews. And then later on in the trajectories, we will also use quantitative surveys because quantitative data is ideal to see how big is a problem or how big is the potential of something, and also to do validation. So in a later phase in our project, we will also do quantitative surveys. So when it comes to the timing, so we used the prioritization, like we assessed with the different assessments we did. And what we did, bearing in mind the principles of design thinking, after each way we evaluated what we had learned, and if necessary, take the learnings or did change the approaches in the next phase. So this is bearing in mind the principles of design thinking, where it's important to each time learn and fine-tune your methodology and ways of interaction. When we set up the different trajectories, of course, we had to consider about who to involve. Like Jessica said, the consumer doesn't exist. So you really have to think for each different case, we had to think about, okay, which consumers do we want to involve? Do we need more rational thinkers or also more intuitive thinkers? Combination of both is best. Backgrounds also is something that you have to consider. The environment, so the fifth pole of the quintuple helix was involved will be involved via in-depth interviews, so environment protection groups, environment activist groups, etc. And when interacting with industry and the farmers or agriculture, we will both focus on traditionalists, but also on innovators and early adopters. So both will be involved. I have to speed up a little bit because time is really running. So also what is really important, of course, these RBAs and all the information that we gather while setting up a trajectory is often not written in layman's terms. So we, of course, have to translate all this information to language that people who are not active in this environment or in this industry can understand as well. And so they can also understand the risks, the benefits, but other things we are saying. So this was also really important when it comes to communication, to just translate it in language that everybody understands, but also to make it neutral and non-biasing. So not to steer the stakeholders into a specific direction. So these were really important attention points. Also, when it comes to the communication strategy and mobilization, we had to ensure that the right profiles are there and contribute, and also that they stay engaged. It's often important that we can come back to them. So that's why also we try to assure to keep the momentum there and that people stay engaged, the stakeholders stay engaged all along the trajectories. These are the central questions that we pose during the co-creation sessions. I won't go through them in detail, but okay, you see, do we assess the general perception of the technology, alternative ways to solve the same problem, etc. Of course, we didn't ask these questions directly. It was more in an indirect way, using different tools and techniques to really assess the drivers and the needs and how people understand these things via exercises like association exercises, science fiction thinking, role play, etc., to really assess what is underneath the surface and doesn't come up directly, and also to really assess their emotions around specific topics, the risks they represent, and the benefits they have. Also prior to the start of the trajectories, we provided a training and support and training, first of all, for the partners, but also support during the rollout of these co-creation sessions and interaction with the different actors. And all along these trajectories also to come to the right impact, as we focused on mutual learning all along the project. So each time we take a step back and say like, okay, what have we learned? What do we have to alter? So we always took the lessons learned along and adjusted the trajectory if necessary. You already did this at this point upon thorough analysis of the results. Okay, I'm speeding up. This is my last slide. So of course, after each co-creation session, but also after all the co-creation sessions together, we will do a thorough assessment to really see, okay, to find the reasoning and the thinking patterns of the different actors around these risks and benefits, and also to assess the knowledge gaps and the misconceptions around these technologies. Because these gaps in knowledge and reasoning and thinking patterns are really the drivers and heuristics that people use when making decisions, and we really have to come to the bottom of that. Also, the barriers for trust and acceptance of these technologies can be found via analysis of all the results that will come out of these co-creation sessions. I'm sorry I took up too much time, but thank you.
Thank you, Velen and Charlotte, and sorry that you had to be rushed a little bit in the end. We have 1 minute left for questions. I don't know if anyone in the audience has questions. It's a lot of information today because it's really about the methodologies that we adopt in the project, and especially also the presentation of Velen and Charlotte. It's quite an elaborate but very effective methodology. Is there anyone who has questions? Laureen?
Sorry, if you would not want to go over time, I can save my question for later. But I actually had a question for Anna. Because if I understood correctly, you also go in interaction with consumers, but actually in your company, you make the HEAM group, right? So
Yeah.
Do you talk with them about the end product that your B2B collaborators work with, or do you talk about a higher level, like how to change consumption patterns, or what
No,
exactly?
So we are actually not talking it ourselves. We are gonna be there on the spot, but we will listen to the consumers, and we have like a third party doing this for us. So there will be a facilitator just to make sure we are not prejudged, like that we are there will be an objective facilitator, and the idea is to indeed test what works with them in terms of how to translate the science language to consumers so that they are not afraid of it. Because we know when we talk about something is fermented, something is produced with biotechnology, they just don't understand fully, and then they immediately closed off. So the purpose is to, of course, check barriers like on a more high level to start with, but also later in the second part of the day, we want to test different statements of what will work when we explain how this product is made, because in the end we need to explain that we use biotechnology, and it's just about finding the right words that speak to them.
Okay, that's clear. Thanks.
Yeah, there was also a practical question in the chat from Xenia, I think, about whether we will share the slides. So first of all, the recording will be made publicly available on the forum. And then for the slides, I think we have to check with the different speakers whether yes or no we can share them. So more info after the masterclass. I think we have to conclude here. I also don't see any other pressing questions. Just maybe a final note on the survey, if I may. I'm going to share my slides once more. Oops, I have to go to the final slide. Sorry for that. Yeah, so of course I want to conclude here that you can follow us on the BTrust forum. The upcoming masterclasses, they will focus on the co-creation use cases and the results that we gathered from applying the co-creation methodology developed by Alice. So please stay tuned for that. And then as announced at the beginning of the masterclass, we would kindly like to ask you to fill out a very short survey. So you can scan the QR code here or use Menti. So it would be really great if you would be willing to do so just in terms of evaluating the content and format of this masterclass. So I would like to thank all the speakers. I think it was a great first masterclass, very interesting insights, angles, perspectives. Thank you very much for the very sound preparations as well. This masterclass will be shared, as I said already, and we hope to see you again for the next masterclass, so stay tuned. Thank you very much and have a nice day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.